You know, there are things that money can't buy, but let's hope that a cure for cancer isn't one of them.
It's hard to believe today, but once every 15 minutes, a man dies of prostate cancer. And once every 15 minutes, a woman dies of breast cancer. And when young children have this disease, they don't understand how they became involved with this horrible plague. They don't know what caused it. Yet 1 out of 3 American people will be affected with this incredible suffering and this needless agony that we're going through. It is a disease that can be overcome. The war can be won.
Jon Huntsman is an American original. From a boy born in a 2-room shack with no indoor plumbing, he has become, at 58, chairman of a petrochemical empire worth over $4 billion. And Huntsman himself is one of the 50 wealthiest men in the world. Central to his success is a keen sense of knowing when to risk buying new companies, like this former Texaco chemical plant he purchased in 1994. And yet, just as central to Huntsman's character is the obligation he has always felt to help those in need. $1 million to the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, which aids the homeless, brought a visit with Pope John Paul II. After the devastating 1988 earthquake in Armenia, Huntsman built a cement plant there to help people rebuild their homes. Even in their first years of marriage, his wife, Karen, realized that $50 of the $250 John received every month as a Navy lieutenant was going to feed a poor enlisted man's family.
John doesn't have to have all the answers written on a piece of paper. He doesn't have to have all the answers in a textbook. He dreams them, he makes them happen.
This past October, Huntsman launched the most ambitious dream of his life with the largest donation in history to medical research. $100 million of his own money and another $51 million he raised to create a research center dedicated to a monumental task, finding the genetic causes and cures for cancer. He can focus the tremendous resources of his companies because Huntsman has never opened his corporation to public shareholders. It remains the largest privately held petrochemical business in the country, with 4 of Huntsman's sons and a son-in-law working with him in Salt Lake and at some of their 81 facilities around the world.
Our shareholders today happen to be our family, and we've kept the business private so that we could move our money, direct our funds, our profits, to causes that we deeply believe in. And we deeply believe in finding a cure for cancer. And if that's why our company was created and developed, then I would accept that as the reason for our existence.
Why would a man whose first job was picking potatoes for 10 cents a bag, who spent a quarter-century fighting his way to the top of his industry, want to give away $100 million of the family fortune? Well, partly it is because in the last 5 years, the battle against cancer has become intensely personal.
When I found that I had prostate cancer myself and watching my parents die of cancer and other close family members, I decided it was time that we really understood this disease much better. And there's no question in my mind that from their father, our children will inherit certain mutant genes that will eventually develop into tumors. My mother had them, my father had them, my grandparents had them.
The Huntsman's 9 children and 27 grandchildren are an extraordinarily close family. One of Jon Huntsman's dreams is to guard them from the suffering which surrounded his own childhood, and he seems determined to realize that dream.
We have now visited all of the major cancer institutes in the United States and in Europe. The characteristic that's most vital today is to allow these researchers an open playing field, to go ahead and take the risk, to turn over every rock, to look for every possible solution. In a way, to be the entrepreneurs of science.
The most important job we have now is to recruit the very best scientists to come share in this vision.
Dr. Ray White, one of the world's leading geneticists, was recruited as head of the Huntsman Cancer Institute. White and his team are convinced that the key to understanding how cancer works lies in examining the faulty genetic programming which creates a human cancer cell.
These are cells that just continue to grow and grow and grow, having lost the knowledge of when to stop. Huntsman's dollars can go into the high-risk propositions, those creative, novel ideas that the very best scientists can come up with, and fund those ideas.
It has long been known in cancer research that one of the best ways to understand the progress of the disease is to examine cells taken from the early stages of cancer, the so-called precursor cells that have not yet become malignant.
Shows a few differences between a normal cell and the cell that has progressed to tumor.
So these are the PPC1s.
But the problem has been identifying these cells early on, where a tumor is not yet visible.
What will you be doing to try to find out the precursor stages of the more difficult cancers?
Our model system is colon cancer, where the colon polyp, which is not itself a cancer, is a precursor state from which cancer develops. Many of the other cancers have precursor states: breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer as well. And it's one of our main goals in the Huntsman Cancer Institute to learn how to identify those precursors.
Construction on a new building will begin this year. But one facility already operating as part of the Huntsman Institute is the high-risk breast cancer clinic, headed by Dr. Sandra Baez.
In certain families, we can actually do the testing for the breast cancer gene, for one of the breast cancer genes. That really makes this a fairly unique service. Noticed any lumps?
No.
If they have the gene, then they have a much higher risk of getting breast cancer. Not 100%, but 60, 70, 80% or more likely to get breast cancer somewhere in their lives. Okay, lie back.
Like Dr. White, Sandra Baez believes the genetic key may unlock a series of steps which will result in treatments for her patients. Utah provides a rich, living laboratory for genetic scientists because the Mormon families who have settled here are traditionally very large and very well documented. Dr. Baez is excited by the clues such a unique population provides.
Here's a family of 5 girls, 4 of whom had cancer. These individuals then had 6 children, and several of them have had cancer, as noted by the filled-in circles. These are breast cancers.
The scientific link between generations became tragically clear as Jon Huntsman took me for a walk through his family cemetery in the small town of Fillmore, Utah, the old state capital. His ancestors were among the original Mormon families who came west with Brigham Young in the 1840s. In this quiet place, we could see a family's genetic legacy lying all around us.
Our family has had more than its share of deaths from cancer. And many of the tombstones you see here in this beautiful little cemetery are the result of deaths from cancer, some very early, like my grandmother's tombstone over there. She had 8 beautiful children. She was still in her 30s and died of this horrible disease.
30s?
In her 30s. My grandfather, when he died, he had cancer of the esophagus, and he choked to death. He couldn't eat anything because there's no way he could digest food. I always get a little emotional when I come here because my mother is buried here. My mother passed away of cancer, and as did my father. I just had a feeling when she had her mastectomy and had breast cancer that it probably was close to the end of her life. I remember picking my mother up and holding her in my arms, just hoping that the Lord would allow me to keep her a little longer when she took her last breath and died. And I almost felt a certain sense of relief for her in my own heart. My heart was broken, but I was so happy that she didn't have to suffer anymore.
As we flew back to Salt Lake City together, it became clear that Huntsman's commitment to a cure extends far beyond the family cemetery we'd just seen. As he travels around the country and around the world, he has often reached into the lives of strangers, like that of 9-year-old Becky, a victim of an especially aggressive form of leukemia. They met at a fundraiser for a children's hospital.
I'm going to Primary Children's Hospital because I have leukemia. I got it when I was 3, almost 4 years old.
I said, Becky, if you had any wish in the world, what would it be? She said, oh, I want to go to Disney World. We took off in this airplane. Her whole family covered every seat. We spent 3 days in Disney World.
It was really a sweet experience.
You went with them. You didn't just send them. You went with them.
No, I went with them, and I was kind of there to see the Mickey Mouse hats and to be sure that they had some extra spending money.
How come you're not tired?
I'm having too much fun.
Oh.
Despite 2 more years of intensive treatment, Becky Bear lost her battle with cancer. That battle became a symbol to Jon Huntsman.
She died about 2 years later, but I mean, you know, she didn't deserve to die.
But she got to do her dream of getting to Disney World.
She got her dream, and in a way it was my dream because...
I was going to say, that must have meant a lot to her, but it also appears to have meant a lot to you.
And she's a great inspiration in my life today. She's an inspiration to live. She's an inspiration to keep on giving. And if somebody said there could be a cure for cancer if you'd give everything you have, I'd give it in 2 seconds.
You do that, all of it.
If one can't utilize their wealth to help conquer a disease and to help the homeless and to help those who suffer, then I don't know what joy they derive from it. And certainly we couldn't receive any joy if we couldn't help others.
Well, there are many very wealthy people who do give money and many who do not, and he is an inspiration.
Sure.
But Hugh, there's been billions of dollars already poured into cancer research. What makes him think that his is going to be the definitive money?
Jon Huntsman believes that we're at a threshold now. He acknowledges the progress that's been made so far in 25 years of cancer research, but he thinks now that he can give, with his contribution, he can give innovative researchers an open playing field, particularly now since there's so much promise in genetic engineering.
Isolating the genes that might cause cancer.
Right.
He's given $100 million.
Yep.
Is that's a lot of money, but is that it?
No, it's not it. As he says, if he needs another 100 million, he'll put it in, and another 100 million after that. And he would give it all if he had a sure cure for cancer. So there's an interesting set of standards. He's a real bulldog.